Across the stars, there exists an ancient empire called the Vel-Dryn Consortium, feared for their darkness-based tech and psychic warforms. But in all their maps, across thousands of species, there is a silent black zone no one enters. No trade routes pass it. No data probes return. This zone is marked only with a symbol, a red circle with old Terran text. Sector 87G, Human Expanse. Do not enter. When a Vel-Dryn warseer accidentally glimpses that sector in a vision, she screams, convulses, and claws out her own eyes. She mutters the last sentence before death. Even the Dark Ones turned away. They had been watching Earth for centuries. Or so they thought. The Vel-Dryn had always considered themselves the unseen eyes of the galaxy, cloaked masters of observation, undetected infiltrators of 1,000 star systems. They moved in the soft margins of space, in the folds between light and shadow, slipping past empires and fleets like ghosts. So when High Operative Talvek was given the mission to recon the forbidden Terran sector, he accepted without hesitation. Earth was myth, a black zone surrounded by silent warning buoys, half buried under legend and technological noise. A dead system, they said. Lost. Forgotten. What threat could the extinct pose? The stealth craft Whispering Veil crossed the boundary into Sector 0, V at 0300 Vel-Dryn Prime Standard Time. They lost contact at 0301 seconds. No warning. No explosion. Just silence. Protocols engaged. Standard recovery drone was dispatched within minutes, armed with a telemetry mirror, radiation-hardened data core, and a visual capture array designed to survive sunfall. The drone vanished into the darkness. And then, something returned. Not the drone itself, but a packet of data. Clean. Precise. Delivered on a frequency the Vel-Dryn hadn't used in over 9,000 cycles. A bandwidth reserved for wartime emergencies and, more specifically, for loss-of-planet events. The message contained only one file. A single frame of video. It was enough. The feed was static-washed at first. Then it cleared, slowly, painfully, revealing an image that made even the hard-worn analysts flinch. A star system. But wrong. The planets were gone. In their place, vast, obsidian-like spheres, perfect in geometry, orbiting in unnatural synchronization. Smooth, featureless, glossy like the surface of deep water. There were dozens, maybe hundreds, where only 8 celestial bodies had once existed. The central stars still burned, but faintly, as if dulled by a filter across time. And then, just before the transmission cut, one of the black spheres blinked. Not a metaphor. Not a metaphorical blink. A vertical fissure opened near its top, a slit of soft, impossible light, like a single, lidless eye narrowing in sudden awareness. And then the screen went black. An audio message followed. 4 words. No frequency trace. No known code, origin. It simply appeared. You have been noticed. Back on Vel-Dryn Prime, silence ruled the command room. No one spoke. Even the AI, designated Vir 7, known for sarcasm-laced banter, shut down its vocal protocols. Operative Talvek's biometric tag showed 0 activity. Not dead, not disconnected, just gone. As if the craft had passed, not into hostile space, but into a higher category of attention. The Vel-Dryn Council convened in sub-level vaults built to survive extinction-class events. The footage was reviewed a dozen times, passed through spectrum filters, psychic wave readers, and language decryption engines. None of it helped. One behavioral technician, trembling and barely able to speak, said it aloud. It blinked. Another added, it saw us. Not the ship. Us. As in all of us. 2 days later, the stars began changing. Not in the human sector. Everywhere. Navigation AIs began reporting anomalies. Familiar constellations shifting slightly, as if altered by degrees no one else could see. Memory logs disagreed with real-time star maps. Ships couldn't align to hyperspace routes. Compasses failed. Worse still, surveillance probes stationed in other sectors unrelated ones, started detecting black spheres at the edge of their visual ranges. Smaller than planets. Closer. Orbiting nothing. Just watching. The spheres didn't act. They didn't respond to transmissions, hails, or scans. But their presence altered something fundamental in every species that observed them, a subconscious awareness, like something intelligent had begun listening to thought itself. The Veldryn, of course, tried to deny it. Their pride was legendary, their espionage unmatched. But deep down, they all knew the truth. They had gone somewhere they weren't meant to go. They had looked into a place designed never to be seen. And worse, it had looked back. One Veldryn psychological theorist proposed the spheres were not surveillance systems, but perception engines. That the Terran system hadn't just erased itself. It had rewritten the concept of being observed. He proposed that the black spheres weren't artificial objects. They were a kind of awareness crystallized. Not machines, not ships, but lenses through which something older than history could see. When he finished presenting his paper to the High Council, he reportedly walked into an energy disintegration chamber without protest. His final words were, "We gave them permission by noticing." On the 15th day, the spheres began to multiply. The images showed up in places no one expected, reflected in the data mirrors of Farlon databanks, projected as phantom signals in Orolithian dream seers. One even appeared in the ritual sky painting of a child on Drennis 4, who had never seen a star map. When asked why she painted a black orb in her picture of the homeworld, the child answered, "It was already there." Panic moved faster than war. Species began sealing off their borders, not out of strategy, but fear. Research into humanity, once a quiet niche in galactic academia, was now outlawed by 6 federations. The galaxy had spent eons ignoring Earth, and Earth had responded with silence. But now it had seen, and maybe, just maybe, it remembered what it once was, or what it became. Because if the spheres were watching, something else was waiting, something deeper, something that built eyes into planets and gave them purpose. Deep in the restricted archives of the Veldryn intelligence vaults, one ancient Terran phrase, long-thought poetic nonsense, was recovered from a cracked data tablet left behind after the Silence Wars. "We are not the darkness. We are what darkness fears." No one knew what it meant then. Now they did. The humans had built more than machines. They'd built witnesses, sentinels, and something in the way those black spheres hovered in the quiet of space, never blinking again, made one thing devastatingly clear. The humans had not been erased. They had not died. They had ascended into attention itself. And attention is the final weapon. Because now, they were watching back. There are things not taught in any official history. Not because they were forgotten, but because someone worked very hard to forget them. Archivist Nyril Voss was not supposed to be in the Department of Sealed Conflicts. It required 5 clearances above his level and a biometric key that didn't belong to him. But curiosity, obsession, and a stolen retinal imprint had opened a door that was never meant to be opened. He wasn't looking for Earth. He was hunting for an answer to a much older question. Why the Galactic Accord, for all its expansionist pride, had left an entire sector of the galaxy marked off-limits, its coordinates scrubbed from all public star charts. He didn't expect to find the Earth War. At first, it didn't make sense. The logs didn't refer to it as a war. The early entries called it Operation Ashfall, a diplomatic enforcement action launched 600 years ago by the High Accord and supported by over 50 participating species. The objective? Neutralize a rising militant power centered on a Class G world designated Earth/Terra. Nyril frowned at the wording. Back then, humanity wasn't even warp-capable. The Accord should have crushed them in days. But the logs told another story. The fleet encountered no resistance at first. Orbital scans of Earth were mundane. Breathable atmosphere, low-frequency EM traffic, scattered orbital debris. No visible fleet. No defense satellites. Primitive by modern standards. A soft target. The early missions were routine. Blockade enforcement, colony destruction, strategic jamming. Cities were razed. Terran military outposts were vaporized. The logs recorded 23 planetary strikes across Earth's outer colonies. Not a single ship was lost. Accord commanders mocked the ease of conquest. But then came Mars. The first anomaly was time delay. Ships that crossed the orbit of Phobos started reporting distorted data, sensor drift, weapon systems auto-locking on friendly vessels, and worst of all, AI systems refusing to execute basic commands. One flagship, the Verdict Ion, began broadcasting music, human music, on all channels. No one had loaded the file. The sound file had no metadata, just an ancient, aching cello piece. Then the crew stopped responding. The last log from the Verdict Ion was text-only, broadcast in the clear, against all protocol. We thought they were weak. We were so wrong. The log ended with coordinates, somewhere above Mars' southern pole, and then static. The Verdict Ion was never heard from again. Other ships soon followed. One by one, the pride of the Accord fleet vanished. Not destroyed, erased. No wreckage, no beacons, not even hyperspace echoes. They just stopped existing. Panicked commanders attempted retreat, only to find their warp drives refusing to engage. Crew members reported hallucinations, vast eyes opening in the void, ships built from bone and steel, and voices speaking in untranslatable tongues. Several logs repeated the same message. This is not technology. This is something else. Nyril scrolled through file after file, disbelief creeping in like frost. There were no reports of human fleets, no great battles in space, just whispers of constructs that moved without propulsion and altered physics around them. One transcript stood out. Incident, Red Halo. Log by, Commander Vex Sorn, Accord Vanguard. Encryption, Alpha Prime, now decrypted. We found something in orbit. It's not a ship. It's not anything I have words for. It moved like it was alive, but it's not biological. It turned to face us. There's no cockpit, no crew, no visible heat signature. Just a shimmer in space, like the idea of a predator rendered into metal. Our firewalls began degrading instantly. Then our memories, our own logs started rewriting themselves. I watched my brother get rewritten. We fired everything. Nothing mattered. And then it spoke. Not to our radios. Not in our minds. It became the signal. It said, Earth is not yours to archive. You were warned. Nairo leaned back in his chair, hands trembling. He was already past the point of no return. Everything about this was wrong. It contradicted centuries of established history. Official records claimed Earth had collapsed due to internal instability, environmental failure, civil conflict. There was never any war, they said, never a fight. But here, buried in forbidden files, was the truth. The galaxy had fought Earth and lost. He dove deeper into the archives terminal, bypassing secondary encryptions until he found the highest classification marker, OBS/core, Obsidian Core Protocol. The warning was clear. For Accord eyes only. Activation authorizes Omega's sanction. Nyril opened it anyway. It wasn't a strategy file. It was a confession. A full recording from a secret tribunal, held in the aftermath of the Earth campaign, where the surviving Accord officials explained what happened and why it would never be told again. The construct above Mars was never identified. Its shape changed depending on who looked at it. Its presence unraveled causality within sensor systems. It didn't attack in any traditional sense. It simply redefined the battlefield until the Accord ships no longer existed. The tribunal called it post-conceptual warfare, weapons that operated at the level of belief. A final note from the tribunal chairman. They didn't evolve like us. They didn't chase the stars. They waited until we reached them, until we broke into the cathedral of their silence. What we met was not war. It was punishment, and it was precise. Nyril backed away from the console. Outside his archive chamber, alarms had begun to sound. Unauthorized access. They were coming for him. He stood, heart pounding, and reached for the portable beacon in his pocket. He hadn't just found a story. He'd uncovered a warning, one that was never meant to be remembered. And if Earth's silence had a reason, he had just broken it. As the door behind him exploded inward and security forces stormed in, Nirel sent one last, encrypted transmission to the outer relay beacons, the only ones not yet compromised. A single line. They're not extinct. They're waiting. And then the signal cut. Far from the Accord worlds, in the black depths of the human sector, the silence rippled. A frequency, dormant for centuries, shimmered to life. No one heard it, but when the black spheres blinked, there are horrors that do not need war to destroy worlds. They simply arrive and unmake everything. The Dark Ones did not come from any known galaxy. They had no origin in space-time, no biology, no language. Their existence was recorded only in aftermaths. Entire sectors turned to static, planets converted into shadow echoes, civilizations rendered into ash and screaming memory. They were not invaders. They were entropy with awareness. No defense had ever worked. No species had ever survived until they touched the edge of the human sector. The event was recorded by the Tor Observatorium, a machine cult orbiting the edge of void space in a vast computation fortress. They detected dimensional tremors, the signature advance of the Dark Ones, across a dozen spectral bands. Reality began to twist in microscopic pulses. Ships passing through normal space caught glimpses, stars glitching like broken pixels, moons inverting their own gravity wells, language itself breaking apart in AI vocal processors. A warning went out across the edge worlds. The silence is arriving. Entire civilizations began evacuation protocols. A 1,000-year-old empire burned its own archive vaults in a single day, not to hide knowledge, but to prevent the Dark Ones from consuming memory itself. The galactic community knew what came next. They expected the same unraveling. But what happened was different. As the Dark Ones descended, phasing across the veil of dimensions into the Terran sector, they stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. It was unprecedented. They hovered just beyond the heliopause of the Sol system, vast tendrils of dimensional noise curling inward, and then recoiling. They made no attack. No attempt to cross further. No deconstruction of time, as they were known to do. Instead, the silence deepened. Tor listening arrays began picking up something strange. Not from the Dark Ones, but from Earth. A signal. A sound file. It traveled across every spectrum, piercing through radiation storms, gravitational noise, even the subharmonics of black hole interference. At first, it seemed like singing. A choir. Ancient. Pure. Not quite human, not quite machine. But the closer the Tor listened, the more wrong it became. There were no breath pauses, no variation in pitch. The voices sang in non-Euclidean harmonic structures, notes folding into one another in recursive symmetries that should not have existed. The pattern was beautiful and impossible. The Tor named the transmission SNT-0, the Black Psalm. The Dark Ones did not attack. Instead, they began to scream. Entire sectors heard it, not through sound but in thought. Dreams turned black. Minds began to itch with unknown languages. One surviving fairy priest wrote in blood on the walls of their monastery. The song is a gate. The gate is a trap. The trap sings back. Even the void began to twist in strange shapes, the cosmic equivalent of flinching. The Dark Ones retreated. For the first time in universal history, they fled. Back through the folds of unreality they had emerged from, leaving no trace, no ruin, just silence. In one final broadcast, sent across 70 dimensions by a fragment of a fractured Dark One, moments before it dissolved into non-being. We saw the womb of death, and it sang to us, "We will not return." What was the Black Psalm? Thousands asked. None answered. Every attempt to decode the signal ended in psychological collapse, data corruption, or, most disturbingly, missing time. One team of Telari sound scientists attempted to isolate its bass melody and recreate it in a simulated chamber. None of them survived. The room was found empty. The chamber walls were scorched with reversed entropy burns. Time itself had fled the space. On the floor, etched into the titanium alloy by no known tool, were 7 words. You tried to echo the unrepeatable. Some believe the Black Psalm is not a song at all, but a prison a self-executing algorithm encoded in sonic pattern, built by Terran minds who had moved beyond matter and into conceptual warfare. The sound itself was a lie, a mask for something deeper. One theory proposes the psalm is a containment field for something even older than the Dark Ones, something the humans had encountered and survived, only by sealing it within a melody that could never be forgotten but never understood. Others say the psalm is a warning, a message to anything powerful enough to hear it. You are not the apex. We are not prey. Approach and be dismantled. Centuries later, whispers still haunt the edge worlds. Among scavenger fleets and broken AI monasteries, the tale circulates. There was once a species so terrifying, so transcendent, that even the things that live outside time refuse to face them. And when someone inevitably asks, what did they do? The answer is always the same. They sang. On a cold rock orbiting a dead moon, a forgotten relay still hums. It carries no signal now, only an echo. Not even that, the possibility of an echo. It sings nothing. And yet, if you stand very still, sometimes you feel the air shift. Not with pressure, but with intention. Because somewhere, perhaps far below the crust of that quiet blue world, the singers are still waiting. Not asleep, not dead, just silent, listening for anything foolish enough to come close again. And far beyond, in dimensions where thought has shape and time weeps, the Dark Ones whisper still. They do not use language. They do not use names. But they share a singular terror, an idea burned into the fabric of their unbeing. A song that should not exist. A name no longer spoken, only feared. The Black Psalm. No one truly believed Earth was extinct. Not the archivists of Virulon. Not the Watchers from the Mirrored Rift. Not even the Silence Monks, who denied all history not etched in stellar ruin. But everyone hoped it was, because if Earth wasn't dead, it meant they had chosen silence. And no one wanted to ask why. In the 39th cycle of the Accord's Silent Recon Initiative, a bold proposal emerged from the outer colonies: direct psychometric mapping of the Sol system through deep-scan neurothreads. It was unprecedented and technically illegal, but curiosity is always braver than memory. The subject chosen for insertion was a post-conscious entity called Reth-Kull 7, a synthetic neuromancer built to interface with anomalous architectures. It had mapped the dreams of sleeping worlds, walked through the broken minds of void-born titans, and extracted song logic from dead AI gods. Reth-Kull 7 had never failed. Until Earth. The scan began at 2:17 Galactic Standard. Nothing unusual at first. The edge of Sol space was quiet. No signals, no defenses, just the same frozen stellar geography that had lulled the galaxy into forgetting. But then something shifted. It wasn't physical. It was a fold in the map of meaning. Kull 7's interface spiked. Its internal chronosense fractured. It began receiving data from its own future, scrambled into recursive thought loops. The observers in the chamber watched in stunned horror as Reth-Kull 7 convulsed, not in body, for it had none, but in concept. Its projected self screamed in binary static. I scanned a grave, and it looked back through me. Seconds later, it broadcast its final words before collapsing into non-existence. They are not gone. They are asleep inside us. Then silence. Total. Permanent. Kull 7 wasn't destroyed. It was rewritten. Panic rippled across the Black Channel networks. Earth hadn't just defended itself. It hadn't used weapons. There were no anti-skin barriers. No shielding. No counterfire. It had responded by rewriting the observer. The Inquiry Council convened, calling upon the buried archives of the pre-silence era, seeking any precedent for such a phenomenon. They found one phrase. Just one. Project Lazarus Protocol. Classified under Extinction Contingency Authority, code Black Tetra. Deep within the quarantine vaults of the Dead SolGov network, there lay an audio file. Unmarked, unindexed, forgotten even by the machines built to remember. A voice spoke, calm, human, female. No modulation, no fear. If you are hearing this, then we are gone. But gone is not dead. We did not build arks. We did not run. We did not beg. We built traps for gods. Then silence. And then a pulse, not of energy, but of intention. Encoded in the pulse was the true Lazarus protocol. Lazarus was not a weapon. It was not a shield. It was a mental machine distributed across space-time, embedded in every quantum field within the soul system. It didn't fire. It didn't burn. It didn't move. It simply existed. And when observed, it observed back. Any conscious intrusion triggered an entropic recursion event. The intruder's mind became a reflection chamber, thoughts turning inward until the self collapsed under infinite cognitive recursion. To see Lazarus was to become the mirror in which it lived. There were no survivors, because Project Lazarus didn't defend Earth. It turned the enemy into its host. Some speculate humanity created Lazarus after their wars with the Voidborn and the Fractal Swarms. Wars that they won, barely, but learned a terrible truth from. The more advanced a threat becomes, the less it fears death. So humanity designed something not to kill, but to make war impossible. A defense system that infected the very act of aggression. If you attacked Earth, you became Earth's echo. Theories abound in shadow forums across forbidden dataspheres. Some claim every entity that touches Earth's system now carries fragments of Lazarus within them, dormant shards of human thought wrapped in paradox code. Some even whisper that Lazarus isn't finished, that every failed scan, every broken probe, every missing mind is part of its learning process. That Lazarus is not just a trap, it's a test. And when enough minds have been rewritten, it will wake. Not to destroy, but to resume. In an ancient drift temple orbiting a red dwarf, a prophet savant of the Urvala spoke only once after a vision he could not contain. I saw the waking of the sleepers, and they did not rise in anger. They rose in clarity, and the stars wept for what they had made. The Accord has since sealed the soul system under 12 separate quarantine orders. It is no longer called a sector. It is now a category. Category, living containment field. Approach is forbidden. Observation is forbidden. Even discussion is regulated under memory dampening protocols. But despite all their rules, there are still those who look, because humanity left no trace. No ships, no fleets, no ruins. Only a single echo, caught in the edge static of every probe that dares come close. A voice, soft, unhumanly calm. You feared what we could become. You were right. We became the answer. And still, deep within Earth's magnetic shadow, something pulses. Not light, not heat, not power, but intention. A presence asleep, not in time, but in meaning. And Lazarus dreams. It dreams of threats. It dreams of trespassers. And soon, perhaps, it will dream of waking. Not as a warning, but as a question. Are you still afraid of the dark? Europa had always been a whisper in the archives. An icy moon orbiting the storm-gutted giant of Jupiter, quiet and lifeless for centuries after Earth's collapse. The old empire's maps marked it simply, no contact, legacy site. But to the faithful, it was more than that. To the cult of the dark reflection, Europa was rumored to be a gate. A Terran wound left half-stitched. A place where ancient human thought bled into the void, and perhaps could be touched. So when the signal finally came, they did not hesitate. It was brief. A pulse beneath Europa's crust, encoded in gravitic harmonics older than the current galactic calendar. Just 5 words. Reintegration subnode. Cycle initiated. The cult called it summoning. They sent their best, a zealot named Marith Koth, an ex-telepath of the Mirrorborn who had once stared into a singularity and claimed to hear it whisper. He arrived alone, descending beneath the moon's ice through ancient, half-frozen tunnels. Machinery from a lost Earth empire still pulsed in the dark, encased in diamond frost, and mycelium sensors groaned like veins. The facility did not resist him, but it watched. At 13 kilometers beneath the surface, he entered the core chamber. The room was hexagonal. Metallic walls shimmered faintly, like liquid mercury frozen midwave. In its center stood a cryovault, upright, sealed by a living metal frame. Inside, a figure. Motionless. Human. Armored. Still. His eyes were open. Not frozen. Waiting. Marith stepped closer. His thoughts began to fracture. The figure, male, tall, scarred, wore armor unlike anything recorded since the collapse. It was not ceremonial nor primitive. It was meant for killing titans. Etched across its chest plate, scorched but legible. Jen, Elian Drake. Terran Command, 1st Conflagration Legion. The name meant nothing to Marith, but the presence it radiated, that meant everything. He reached out, placing a hand on the stasis field. His mouth opened to speak the incantation taught by the cult's inner circle. He never got the words out. The general's eyes shifted, and then they locked onto his. The voice was not projected. It did not echo in the room. It simply was, "You shouldn't have come." Marith fell to his knees. The air became heavy, then electric, then hollow. "Now we know where you are." Across the galaxy, at that very moment, every known cult of the Dark Reflection, across 70 systems, from asteroid enclaves to organic moons, convulsed in unison. Billions of followers screamed. Some tore out their eyes. Some laughed hysterically as their bodies erupted into bloodless ash. But most simply collapsed. Empty, as if they'd never been inhabited at all. The cult ceased to exist. In less than 6 seconds. Back on Europa, Marithkoth was no longer screaming. He was still on his knees, but his body was changing. Flesh collapsed inward, like it had been unwritten. Where his face had been, now only a reflective void remained. The Terran general watched, unmoving, as if judging. And then the cry of Alt opened. The ice chamber groaned, steam hissing as the stasis lock disengaged. The general stepped forward, unarmed but entirely unconcerned. He moved like someone who had waited too long to begin again. Holograms flickered to life around him. Ancient maps of the solar system, names blinking in warning red. Titan dormant. Mars purged. Earth active. Europa node online. Awakening sequence accelerated. One word appeared in larger font, pulsing in deep crimson. Revenant. He pressed his hand against the console. His voice was quiet, not angry, just inevitable. Let them know. The Watchers have returned. Orbiting Europa, a cloaked satellite that hadn't transmitted in over 400 years powered on. It sent a single beam of tachyon data, directed not outward but inward to Earth. Somewhere beneath the Pacific Trench, something ancient shifted. Not a machine. Not quite. A presence. It did not speak. It did not move. It simply changed the status of one protocol. From dormant to listening. Aboard the drifting husks of what remained of the Dark Reflection fleet, only silence remained. Ships once full of chanting zealots now spun lifeless in deep space, their lights flickering under unknown power fluctuations. One ship, however, sent a final transmission before going dark. They're not gone. They're not asleep. We mistook silence for absence. We mistook warning for invitation. Back on Europa, General Elian Drake gazed up through miles of ice and steel toward a starless sky. He did not smile. He did not mourn. He simply whispered, "We left the doors open. Now the war comes home." In far sectors of the galaxy, where distant eyes still scan the ruins of Earth, a strange phenomenon begins to unfold. Observer AIs glitch when focusing near Sol. Time dilation anomalies ripple across FTL paths. And the stars near Earth's edge begin to flicker, not in brightness, but in recognition, as if something behind them had started to watch back. And somewhere deep in the subconscious of surviving empires, a thought begins to spread like static. Humanity did not build defenses. They became one. At first, it was just a whisper in the hyperspace drift channels. A survey beacon near the edges of Sector 87G began transmitting corrupted data. Not interference, not jamming, just absence. Star positions shifted. Navigation markers scrambled. Entire moons misclassified. The beacon's last readable file was a raw visual feed, just static and a slowly encroaching fog that moved without motion. It wasn't smoke. It wasn't gas. It didn't reflect light or absorb it. It simply erased. Behind the static came a final pulse. This system is no longer yours. And then the beacon went dead. It wasn't until 3 standard cycles later that the truth began to emerge. The human sector, that cursed wedge of dark space forbidden for over 3 centuries, was growing. Not just in size, but in influence. Astronomers from the Chaldean fringe began noticing distortions near the Perseid line. Celestial drift no longer obeyed predicted patterns. Stars at the edge of 87G weren't going nova or collapsing. They were just gone. 1 week later, a transport convoy tried to remap the edge. It never returned. Rescue probes found only a looping audio broadcast embedded in the cosmic microwave background. Memory compromise detected. Stabilizing timeline. Redefining borders. And then came the erasure. It began subtly. Entire planetary systems were no longer recognized by their own civilizations. Trade hubs disappeared from star maps. Names of ancient colonies were met with blank stares. Merchants from fringe worlds couldn't recall their own supply routes. The worst case was the Vescan Archive, an interstellar library moon that had cataloged every known species since the pre-Silence era. A team of scholars opened their databases one morning to discover that 12 star systems had been deleted. Not just the data, but the memory of their existence. One of them, a xenohistorian named Ilaris Duth, wrote in her final log before deleting herself. "We found gaps, but we cannot find the reasons. And now we are becoming the gaps." Panic spread. The Galactic Senate, long fractured by bureaucracy and cultural drift, convened an emergency session for the first time in decades. Delegates from over 3,000 systems gathered, unsure what to even call the phenomenon. Some demanded to classify it as an invasion. Others argued it was a natural anomaly. But all of them agreed on one fact. The sector was growing faster than light should allow. Entire regions near its edge had been replaced by something now called the null expanse, a zone where reality held, but information did not. Scans returned. Instruments worked. But when observers looked away, they forgot what they'd seen. Ships sent and returned hollow. Crews speaking in recursive riddles or not speaking at all. The few who retained clarity described only one thing inside the null expanse. Structures that should not exist. Floating cities made of memory and war. A fog that learns. Desperate for answers, the Senate summoned the Accord's oldest remaining AI envoy, a logic entity called VOC-4, built during the Human Reconciliation Treaties. It studied the telemetry for less than 30 seconds before issuing a single verdict. This is not expansion. This is correction. The sector is becoming what it always was. When asked to clarify, VOC-4 replied, "Human space was never static. It was sleeping. Now it dreams itself outward." The AI self-deactivated 5 minutes later. Its core was found melted from the inside. The final trigger came when the Vorticay sent a diplomatic drone into the expanding fog near star cluster Rho Kappa. The drone carried only peaceful language packets and ancient Terran history scrolls retrieved from a time capsule buried on Mars centuries ago. The fog enveloped it instantly. For 17 seconds, it remained online. Then, it sent a burst transmission, high compression, no encryption. The message was relayed directly to the Senate chamber. A voice. Female. Uniged. Terran standard. No modulation. "We remember you." The entire Senate went silent. Then the second line arrived. "You knew what we were becoming, and you allowed us to be hunted." More murmurs. But the final line sealed the fate of every listening mind. "We allowed the Dark Ones to exist. We do not allow second warnings." 6 senators collapsed from neural overload. One delegate from the Kalari Republic tore off his ocular implants, claiming he could see the stars forgetting him. Within hours, every fleet docked near the human sector issued immediate retreat orders. No explanation, just blind animal urgency. Entire alliances pulled back their borders. The Zentari Union declared Sector 87G a conscious zone, not a place but a mind space. Their written verdict read, "What expands is not matter. It is judgment. Across the galaxy, ancient warlords and pirate kings began fleeing toward the galactic edge, whispering of the reckoning fog. Monasteries of the Order of Light, Silence began self-immolating. The pharaohs combined detonated their own Starforge stations to prevent cognitive contamination. And in deep, uncharted space, rogue fleets tried one last thing: attack. They launched hundreds of long-range antimatter warheads into the fog's growing edge. Not a single detonation occurred. The missiles disappeared mid-flight. And the war fleets? They turned on each other. Without orders. Without reason. Ships fired on sister vessels. Pilots screamed of seeing copies of themselves, fighting back. By the time the black box data reached neutral space, only fragments remained. The last lines spoken before the final self-destruct. They are not human anymore. They are what comes after. Now, cartographers label the expanding region simply the Forbidden Threshold. Sector 87G is no longer considered real space. It is memory space, a region where history is fluid, where the act of not forgetting becomes rebellion. The expansion continues. Not fast, but inevitable. And still, the message repeats on all abandoned channels. We allowed the Dark Ones to exist. We do not allow second warnings. The galaxy had not seen the Dark Ones kneel in millennia. Born in the shadows of failed stars, wrapped in void metal and governed by neural collectivism, they had consumed empires, shattered suns, and rewritten the laws of sentient biology to suit their hunger for dominion. Entire species had whispered their name not in fear, but in inevitability. Yet now the unthinkable had happened. They were afraid, and that fear had a name. Earth, not as it once was blue, hopeful, idealistic, but Earth as it had become. Forgotten, silent, unreachable, and now unignorable. The sector had grown. Too far, too fast. The void around Sol was no longer a star system, nor grave. It was an event. Galactic borders had been around it. Perception itself struggled to wrap around the expanding zone, as if the idea of Earth now defied logic. Every attempt to contain it had failed. Now, even memory betrayed those who'd once mocked the Terrans. The Dark Ones, lords of entropy and war, knew this. They had once laughed at Earth's silence. Now, they whispered among themselves. Some demanded they flee to another galaxy. Others, the few unbroken, demanded to strike first, burn it all before it awakens fully. But the old mind, the hive thought that spanned their entire race, made a final decision. They would beg. A single envoy ship was dispatched. It bore no weapons, no encryption, no crew, only one voice, stored in raw quanta, the voice of the primordial leader of the Dark Ones. And one phrase: we surrender. Mercy. We kneel. As it crossed the edge of the forbidden threshold, all long-range scans failed. Time lost cohesion for 0.8 seconds across 12 nearby systems. Nav systems reported new star alignments, colors not in known spectra. The envoy arrived in orbit above Earth, but the planet was not visible. It sat beneath an obsidian cloud, neither smoke nor light nor dust, just absence. And then something emerged. The ISS Harbinger, a Terran vessel, massive and cold. It looked like it had been built in another age, or perhaps outside of time entirely. Its hull was wrapped in black armor, not paint, matter that swallowed intention. No heat signatures, no propulsion trails. It simply was. The envoy sent its signal, repeating, formal, humble. We offer peace. We surrender. We will erase all record of our trespass. We will never return. For 17 minutes, there was silence. Then, without motion, without sound, the Harbinger responded. Not with lights, not with weapons, but with a voice. Not through speakers, not through comms, but into the mind of every sentient creature in the galaxy. It was not male, not female. It was not angry. It was tired. We never asked for peace. We asked to be left alone. Across 10,000 systems, every ship paused. Every priest fell to their knees. Every artificial intelligence recoiled. You hunted us in the name of fear. You erased us in the name of order. You forgot us, hoping silence was weakness. We became silence. The stars above Earth flickered. Not dimmed. Flickered. As if blinking. As if something behind them was no longer pretending. And then, across the galactic core, constellations failed to align. Astronomers screamed. Not because they saw something, but because they saw nothing where something should have been. Memory, time, and space unwound. And still the voice continued. You named yourselves dark, but we were the night you feared. Back in orbit, the envoy ship began to disintegrate. Not from heat, not from force, but as if reality had rescinded its permission for its existence. Its metal unstitched, its signal stuttered, but one final word escaped. Mercy. And then, the stars went dark. Literally. In every known system, the stars flickered and ceased. Not dead, just hidden, as if the galaxy itself had blinked. In those 7 seconds of blackness, species screamed. Some thought the universe had ended. Others thought they had died. But in the dark, they heard something. Not a word, not a command. A heartbeat. Massive, rhythmic, alive. And when the stars returned, so did memory. But not the same. Entire governments no longer remembered who they were at war with. Galactic maps now showed empty regions where empires once stood. Vast databases had been rewritten. Species that once claimed victory over humanity found no record of it. No battles, no names, no victories. Just one note in the margins of old logs. System error, contact redacted. Cause, Terran correction protocol. On the edge of known space, an ancient observer AI, Model 41 Upsilon, oldest of the Neurarch line, spoke for the first time in 412 years. To no one. It was never about vengeance. It was about boundaries. We crossed them. The Harbinger remained in orbit. It never moved. It never attacked. But every 47 minutes, it transmitted a single signal. One phrase, looped across all channels. We did not evolve to destroy. We evolved to survive. In the cycles that followed, a term began to spread across survivor cultures. Not official, not codified, just whispered in trade ports and smuggler havens. The night, Earth chose to breathe. No fleets approached the Sol system again. All star maps listed it as null void, observed. Access forbidden, not by law, but by understanding. Because now, the galaxy knew the truth. Humans had not died. They had not vanished. They had simply become what you find when you go too far. They were the warning written in silence. The response coded into extinction. And when the universe finally asked for peace, humanity did not reply. Because the stars had already gone dark, and their answer had already been given.